I was talking to a COO and he told me he needed to double revenue in 2 years. That's a stretch target. And the question I always like to ask when you have these stretch board or leadership targets is, what would break first if your revenue or your sales were to double tomorrow? Because if you can answer that question, that's how you understand the bottleneck that's holding you back from achieving that goal. Now, there is some structure to this. You don't have to just ask the question. There's actually 5 sub-questions that you can ask to make sure you understand the true bottleneck that's holding you back. And what I call this is the 5x5 diagnostic. It's 5 questions and you can do it in 5 minutes. But what I encourage you to do is try it with your team. Let's run through it now, and then you can ask your team as soon as tomorrow to uncover those bottlenecks. The first question is, what is the specific target or goal you're trying to meet? Because more often than not, we just have a target which is grow revenue or adopt AI, but that's not good enough. It needs to be a specific goal, target, or metric, something to measure. So if you're doubling revenue, what's your current revenue? If there's a timeline of 2 years, when does the clock start? Understanding that target first is the key question. The second question is, where does the pressure first get felt? So if you're doubling revenue or sales, which team or area is going to scream loudest? I like the which team is going to scream phrase because that highlights who is going to put their hands up and say, we need help. So this might be your customer onboarding team, might be in the inventory management, might be the production team. But either way, typically it's in your operations. It's the work that's already going on that just can't handle the extra volume. So the next question to dig deeper onto this is, where is the friction within that team? So if the production team has said, we can't handle the extra sales, dig into that. Why is that? What part of that production process will feel the friction most? Maybe it's because the team doesn't have the skills. Maybe they have skills for the current level of production, but to double revenue, they would need to increase the skills for new machines. Or maybe the knowledge is in people's heads. So if anyone goes off sick or goes on vacation, the knowledge is with them and they find it difficult to deal with production without them being on the shop floor. Then you go on to question number 4, which is the signal, the metric, the measure of what is already showing you there is a problem. These are problems that are showing you the fingerprints of the bottleneck. So for example, if customers are already complaining of late shipping, doubling revenue and increasing production will just make that matter worse. So look at your data, your systems, your people. Listen to what they're saying because they're probably already telling you what the problems are. For example, with one client I was working with, the inventory management metric in our source system was not correct. So they were managing inventory outside of the system. To do that with more revenue and more sales would mean more manual process. They're already complaining about having to manage the inventory outside of the system. That's your signal on what to fix first within the department. And then the 5th question is the constraint. If a constraint was to go away, which one would it be? Not 10, but just pick one to start with because you'll get a lot of ideas from your team and there'll be lots of ways to improve the business. But pick one, the biggest one that will move the needle. So back to the inventory example, it might be making sure that inventory metric is accurate and up to date in the system. Or it might be training for the team so they have backups if anyone's off sick or is going on leave. Either way, you have a smooth process that will work without those bottlenecks in it. And that will help you achieve that number 1 target that you've set for the team. Most operators don't ask these questions, but so ask these questions in order. See which one your team is challenged with, which one they stall with, which ones they feel uncomfortable with, because that's your answer to unblocking your bottleneck and then achieving that board set goal. Hope that helps, and I'll see you in the next one.